It's go time, party people, as I am packing my bags and leaving on a jet plane as I read this to you, and welcome to Countdown to Classic. This is a podcast that educates, informs and gossips about World of Warcraft Classic. Each week we discuss the news, hot button issues and content of the highly anticipated Classic servers. I'm your host, Josh Corbett, and this is a show where it's not my opinion on World of Warcraft that counts. Well, maybe a little bit today, but mainly yours. If you're new to the show, Countdown to Classic goes through your expert input on everything relating to the sure-to-be amazing World of Warcraft Classic. Today, just before I walk out the door and jump on this plane to California, and I finally got that long-awaited reference to the wizard in, so I've checked that box on the show. Anyone under 30 can go ahead and Google that movie. But anyway, I wanted to get an episode out to you all and bring you a take on some of the latest news involving more purported leaks of the Classic demo, and also, along with that, play you a few listener calls about Paladins, Druids, the community, rep grinds, the demo, and more. As per usual, if you are enjoying these in-depth conversations that Countdown to Classic brings you on a regular basis, please do visit the show's Patreon page to see how you can help support Countdown to Classic continue to bring you more of the content that you're now so used to hearing on the show. Alternatively, you can also help the show out by mentioning the show to a friend. Talk about it in-game. Talk about what you hear on Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, or wherever you're actively discussing things. Follow me on Twitch at Countdown to Classic, or leave the show a review on iTunes. If you want to hit me up with some feedback or submit a memory lane or anger management of your own, then you can always hit me up at feedback@countdowntoclassic.com as well. If you can't get enough of me for some reason, then please do also check out my other podcast, The Cinephiles. That's SINNERFILES.com if you haven't already, for some great comedic takes on all your favorite movies between myself and my two co-hosts there. I've just published Ghost this week, and that was a bit of fun, so please do look out for that one. And a lot of you have been jumping on the Cinephiles lately, as the numbers have been going through the roof, so thank you so much for that. A lot of you have been writing to me saying that you've been loving laughing along with us, so we do appreciate the downloads. But with all that said, I'm just going to go ahead and launch into a bit of an elongated soliloquy about these leaks and quickly give you my take, just crudely, before we jump into some listener calls on other topics. Now, obviously you've all seen them by now, I'm quite sure. There have been a number of screenshots that have been leaked to the community. You've seen all the videos, perhaps, like me, you've been sitting at home over the last couple of nights and just devouring everything, watching the side-by-sides, taking everything individually, hearing the commentary, and making your own sort of judgment on how you feel about what's coming with the game. Now, obviously, these were some leaked screenshots that many of the content creators have been provided or going over. We've seen them from Tips, S-Fan, Stay Safe, Alex Sensual, all the usuals, and everyone's been putting up their own opinions. So I'll just give you my take real quick. Well, I should say this at the top before I go into this. Obviously, this is something that has been plugged into what they call a sandbox, and it's not the actual demo up and running. It's a bit of, nefarious tinkering has been going on, and people are playing with values and plugging things into, places they wouldn't necessarily go, and providing us with this data. Now, I'm throwing in the caveat straight away that, we just take this again with a slight grain of salt. It's nice to sort of see that there might be some weight attached to it, but again, this could all be bullshit. Who knows? But it's probably a bit closer to reality than anything else. So I'm more than happy to comment on it. Now, the one thing that everyone has been picking up on are these classic versus modern graphics, this toggle that we debated, back and forth over the last few months, whether this would be an option. It very much so seems to be an option. Now, that's something that you can see in the UI. They've made it look like the retail UI. It's not like the old one that we're so used to. And it's something where you can just switch with one click of a button to lower resolution, lower textures, all that jazz, just like it was back in the day. Now, the quote-unquote modern graphics do seem to be slightly updated textures, some extra foliage, shadows, things of that nature. It's not a drastic change, the update that they've made to the graphics, but it is noticeable, I'd say. Now, some people, that level of noticeability might differ from person to person. It's completely subjective. Now, there are some screenshots where I look at it and say, I can barely fucking tell the difference. And there are others where it's glaringly obvious. So I haven't actually quite come to a decision which I prefer, which some of you might be sitting at home going, oh God, Josh, no, I could tell straight away. I definitely prefer the classic look. Or, oh my God, they've done such a great job with the modern look. I'm 100% going with that one. I'm still very much so on the fence, and it's a little bit situational for me. There are some screenshots where I go, well, it's very clear that the modern one looks better there. Or there's another one where I go, oh, fuck that. I'm going with classic. Come on, look how cool that looks. And it really is like I'm being pulled in two directions on this one. And I feel a little bit like Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, talking to myself going, oh, classic is clearly better. And then I turn into the other guy and go like, you're on drugs. Look at that nice glassy water and how slick it looks. And on the water effects, that's again, there are times where I see a certain lake in those screenshots and I go, you know what, the classic look with all those choppy polygons and what looks like rough water, if you will, I like that. And then I'll turn around the next time and say, oh, look how nice and glassy and calm the canals of Stormwind look. I want that. Who knows? When I'll be able to make up my mind? When I'm actually playing the demo and I get the chance to really fiddle around with it. And I don't think it will necessarily become situational then. I think by spending a few hours within the demo, we'll really get a feel for what they've done with these graphics, and then you'll be able to make an informed choice on which you prefer in the long run. And to be honest with you, I do kind of think that I'm the kind of person that once I pick one, I would just more than likely stick with it. I'm not the kind of person that would, play a few levels on modern graphics and then hit the toggle and play a few levels on classic graphics. That's not really generally what I do. I like to just ride or die with one choice. So I'll figure out early what I like and go from there. Now, in terms of the level of changes that they've made with the graphics, again, as I said, I don't think it's drastic. I really do think there are some screenshots where you take the foliage out of the equation. It's actually quite hard to tell the difference. But there's others where it is glaringly obvious. So again, situationally, I'll see what I like on the whole. But, we talk about things like the foliage. And, one of the things that I was laughing about is everyone's talking about grass over the last couple of days on the, forums, and the old adage of, beer then grass, you're on your ass comes to mind. But it's one of those things where how much grass is too much grass, and all you stoners, please stop giggling while I say that. But the foliage at times seems like a bit much. And I'm like, whoa, settle down with the fucking greenery. Like, I get it. But, there's other moments, again, I'm flip-flopping here, where it seems quite nice and gives the area a bit of life. And, if that's something that was the original intention of the developers, then so be it. But what I do really, really like, and obviously it's been commented on elsewhere, but if it is the case that this is actually something that is incredibly optional and you can configure it to your liking, in terms of the fact that it seems to be the case you can turn off extra foliage but turn on other elements of the graphics, such as the glassy water. That would be kind of cool to tinker with it that way. I might be the kind of person that definitely doesn't necessarily sit with modern versus classic and actually lies somewhere in between. Some of you may feel the same way. Just pick and choose your own spots and see what you like. But the grass and the foliage, there are definitely times where it's almost out of control. I feel like it's so grassy. I'm like, what are we doing here? We're just covering the whole land in grass. I know I'm being hyperbolic, and that's not, not every area in the game is very grassy, but where there is, I'll just wait and see for the time and see what I like. In terms of the shadows, I'm fine with the shadows that they've done. I know some people lost their minds if they change the shadows. Well, they've given you the option and it's there, so just do what you will with it. Now, we talk about things like toggles and options, and this was a really big sticking point for some members of the community, and quite frankly, it's here. If this is legit, it's here. Now, I've got a funny feeling something's going to happen in regards to this. We had the whole changes versus no changes argument over the last, year. People have come and gone through the forums. Tears have been shed. It's been crazy. It died down a few months ago a little bit, but for the most part, we all know what I'm talking about. Now, I don't know about you. I term this as a change. Not that it's a big deal. This isn't about, declaring victory for one side over the other. And a lot of you know that I was no changes for, my own reasons. And a lot of you understood as well that I was more than happy for other people to seek their own changes that made a lot of sense. And over the last 8, 9, 10 months on this particular show, a lot of the changes community have come on to this show, argued their case and made some fucking solid points to the point that I'm going, that makes way too much sense. Maybe that's something that should be done. And even though personally I don't want anything changed, I wouldn't be upset if some of those things that people have requested went through. At the end of the day, as many of you know, I don't really give a fuck. I just want to play this game. I've been beaten into submission. Just get it to me now. But back to my original point, I do term this as a change. And so I just have a funny feeling that some members of the no changes crowd are going to flex and curve and bend their arguments a little bit and say, it's not a core gameplay change, so it doesn't count. No changes still won. No changes, baby. Yeehaw. And I just feel like that's probably an incorrect interpretation in my mind. People were arguing against this toggle. No changes. People were like, I don't want to see this toggle in the game. If it's there, it's a change. It's bullshit. Well, it looks like it's there. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised that not that many people are bitching about it, because the majority of the community actually seems relatively happy with the option that has been provided. These modern graphics aren't really getting people bent out of shape, and that's been really delightful to see. There hasn't been a lot of toxic posts about it, a lot of vitriol. People, I think, as I say, with the beaten to submission term, my theory has been, and I know there's been some pushback against me on this in the Discord, in some people that I've talked to, all sort of, very genially and politely. People say, oh, Josh, I don't think that's quite the case. But my thing with this is, I think many of us have been beaten into submission. And I just think we've been waiting so long, and it's so hyped at this point, that most people probably don't care as much as they used to in regards to the whole changes, no changes, what they wanted to see in the game, the design philosophies behind the project, blah, blah, blah. At this point, it's just like, just give us a release date. Let me play the game. I'll play it your way, Blizzard. Just please let me play it. I think there's so few people out there anymore who are like, well, I won't play it under certain conditions, blah, blah, blah. That seems to have died down a little bit. But that's just, again, a personal interpretation. Please write to me and let me know if you do happen to disagree with my take. But I just think that, again, the no changes crowd will twist a little bit in order to still deem this one as a victory. And that's a stance that I think is, quite frankly, I just think if people have received information that shows that their point has been shot down, then a concession is somewhat in order. At least that's what happens in the field that I'm in. But we shall see what comes. Now, in terms of talents, there was some more information about, yes, it very much so seems like we are getting the 1.12 talents, if everything is to be believed from what we have seen. And again, not a shock at all. That's not as much of a shock, if you call it a shock, as the graphics toggle. But 1.12 talents is fantastic. It seems like everyone is quite happy with that one. I've got really not much more to say about that. We were all expecting it. The comment I would have on progressive content is, obviously there was a screenshot that seems to indicate that Nax would not be in the game in the start due to its placement at the start. That's, again, not really much of a shock, so I'm not going to go too deep on that one. People were very much so expecting progressive content. I've talked recently on the show about how my stance was so erroneous from when I very first started Countdown to Classic, how one of the more shocking things that I said in the first handful of episodes was, I asked the question, well, I don't really understand what the problem is if they just release everything at once. And again, I really want to emphasize this. When I said that, I based that off of what Blizzard themselves had told us. They had said they don't really want to put a lot of time and resources into this project. It's not something that they want to break their backs doing. They really kind of gave the impression that they wanted to give us Classic, say, there, you've got it, we love you, now we're kind of leaving you be. And with that information in hand, I then said and posed the hypothetical question, well, it might be the case that maybe, weirdly, they will just drop everything on us. And I don't really see what the major problem with that would be. And then, thankfully, all of you dear listeners jumped on me and you were very polite in doing so and said, Josh, you don't understand. Here are all the major issues that would happen if we got everything at once. You know, you get the hardcore raiders going and getting their gear straight away. Everything's thrown out of whack. PvP becomes a nightmare, blah, blah, blah. I completely understand that. So I won't delve too much more into that. I've seen the answer to that question very much so since then. But again, it's not a shock. Since then, I've learned it's not a shock that progressive content is coming. And I'm happy. I'm happy. It's great to see that that's the case. No one is really commenting on it because, again, not a shock. Items that are in the game. Now, there's been some talk of Talisman of Binding Shard. Talisman of the Binding Shard, however it's said, is in the game. And, if that is the case, again, I can see it's, they've pulled it out of the code and it's sitting there. I'm not sure if that's a mistake or not, but I would basically hypothesize the same thing. And it would be really, really cool if they did just, recount everything that happened in vanilla. Give one person Talisman of Binding Shard and then end it. That would be fantastic. It scratches that retro itch for a lot of people. That person then becomes a god amongst, the player base, and it would just be a nice thing to see. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for Blizzard to have shout outs to the past throughout the duration of Classic. And we talk about things like the release of Zul'Gurub and the Corrupted Blood incident. And as I've again said earlier on the show, I think it would be kind of cool if they just did Corrupted Blood again. Do it for a couple of hours, whatever it's going to be, and just run it back, let everyone have a bit of fun. Don't let it go too long so it's not game breaking. But, again, shout outs to the past that I really do think Blizzard might be down with, particularly if it is the case that Talisman of Binding Shard is in the game. It sounds like they might be up for doing it all over again as it was. So that's a really good thing to see. But look, I'm really happy with everything I've seen. And in terms of being happy, I haven't seen anything that pissed me off. So a lot of you seem to be the same way. If you do have any major gripes from what you've seen, though, write into the show, or better yet, call me and say, Josh, I disagree with you. I'm angry and here's why. And I'm happy to air a contrary opinion. But quite frankly, everything's all good. I'm really looking forward to getting more information at BlizzCon. As I've told you, I'm getting on a flight pretty soon. I'll be there basically tomorrow. And, there's going to be a lot of hype and a lot of new information dumped on us. Again, as you've heard, I am expecting a release date. Some of you disagree with me on that. You say, no, it won't come. That's just a gut feeling from me. Again, I make predictions all the time that don't necessarily come true. Some do. That's the nature of the game. Most people, shoot 50-50. That's fine. I think we're getting one. And again, summer 2019 is my best guess. June 4th, if I'm being specific. But, I just really, really think that everything is great. We got the second water cooler update from the team as well regarding the demo. Levels 15 to 19, 2 zones only. We got Westfall. We got the Barons. So it's, again, talking about predictions that I got wrong. I said Elwyn and Durotar. I mentioned that in my interview with Bo Bell, he surmised that if they did do the Barons and Westfall, that simply the amount of content that's available is a bit lopsided, balanced towards the Horde. So the Horde might have more to do than the Alliance in the demo. And I agreed with that, which is why I thought Westfall and Durotar made more sense. But I can see what Blizzard is trying to do. It's sort of, content balance, be gone. We don't care about you. We want people running around with talents, experiencing classes when they're just sort of getting into the swing of things with a few more abilities. Totally understand that. It's probably the right thing to do at the end of the day. Many people are upset that they can't start from level 1. And whilst it makes a lot of sense to throw people in at level 1 and start your journey, your hero grows, I guess if you're showing off a demo to people that maybe haven't played vanilla before, it might be better to show them a bit more of what they're going to be able to do. If they start at level 1, they have fewer abilities, then they're not using talents until level 10, obviously, and they might not get to see as much as Blizzard obviously hopes for them to see. So I totally get where Blizzard is coming from on that angle and don't begrudge them at all. I do have somewhat of an issue with the timing in terms of the time limit. Now, I'm really surprised that Blizzard did not get hammered a little bit more for this. I'm not overly upset. I sort of was a little bit upset, but not to the point that I'd go and write an angry post on a forum. But when I went to the forums, I was expecting to see some really, really angry posts. And quite frankly, I didn't see that many. And the ones I did see weren't really flamingly toxic. So again, when I come into that beaten into submission argument, I just think that people are so happy the demo is here and it plays right into Blizzard's hands marketing wise. They've given us, drips of information and now it's here and we're so starved for it. We don't care. We just want to play it. And that's why they can kind of say, well, look, there might, and I should say this, obviously they said that there might be time limits. It depends on what's going to happen with the server. It's not a sure thing, and we're all speculating on, well, what does that mean? Are we going to be able to play for a couple of hours and then get kicked off for a couple of hours? And I disagree very much so with a point brought up by Tips on one of his videos recently where he said he wasn't particularly troubled by the time limit. He said, well, we're only getting 6 days with the demo anyway, so you are already time limited. Well, here's my problem with that point is if you throw a time limit within the time limit, it is an issue. If you're now limiting the amount of hours that we can play the game within the limited 6 days that we already had, that's a pretty big fucking issue. Now, a lot of people have been saying that, they want to play the shit out of the demo. They want to play, give me a 24-hour straight run. I want to level every class from 15 to 19. I'm going to do it all. And if the server starts to go into overload and you now get kicked out for a few hours due to other people needing to get a chance, which is understandable, I just think that that is somewhat problematic in terms of people who have paid for the virtual ticket and paid for this product and want to be able to experience it as much as they can, to throw in effectively 2 time limits if it gets to that stage is a little bit of a head scratcher in terms of, people have talked about, well, surely Blizzard has the server capabilities to deal with all this and, they've sold too many virtual tickets. Maybe they weren't prepared for it. I mean, I don't want to comment too much on this, but I'm sure Blizzard has the resources to deal with it. I mean, there must be some other element that has come into the decision to put on time limits to people. But, I just thought that was a note that really stood out to me. And it's not a big deal. It's something that will come into play, I think. But, if we don't get there, if the servers handle everything fantastically well, then it's a non-issue. If nobody's really getting kicked out or very, very, very few of us, then whatever, people will deal with it. I do understand that. But obviously the 6-day time limit may be extended. J. Allen Brack used that word at least, when he did talk about the date that it would be open for. So we shall see. But anyway, that's really my take on everything that we've heard. I've been flat out with work. I've been packing for the trip as well. I haven't been able to dive into it anywhere near as much as I would like to. Don't get me wrong. I've seen a shitload of videos and I have taken in a lot of information over the last few days. So I'm not coming at it from a completely blind angle, but I'd love to do it more. And while I'm in California, I will be reading more and more and looking at more and more and getting back to you when I can. But now we'll get to the listener calls in Calling Countdown. Okay, we've got another caller on the line now, and who are we talking with?
This is the man, the myth, the legend that is Thaloris.
Dolores, yes, someone I've been dying to talk to on the show. We've obviously bumped into each other a little bit here and there around the various Discord channels that we're a part of, and you're someone who is very, very vocal, and you seem very knowledgeable about not only a number of issues, but in particular everything and anything Paladins. And just for the listeners' benefit, you are someone who it's a funny story because I've actually been struggling to find Paladin experts, and I was so happy to come across you, and you were kind enough to say that you'd put your hand up and come on and do my Paladin interview when I do eventually get to that one day on the show in the future. But just to let the listeners know, they will be hearing from you again. But we're doing a little bit of a shorter call this time, and this is in regards to a point that you brought up about the demo. Now, you're a little bit of a theory crafter, and you told me that you had some plans for when you get your hands on the demo. So why don't you tell everyone what those plans are?
Well, one of the interesting things that I have always theory crafted on and have been chomping at the bit ever since this particular game mechanic was taken away / nerfed by the Lights Hope devs was it's known as judgment stacking. Mm-hmm. So basically, Paladins have 3 debuffed judgments that they can apply: Judgment of Light, Judgment of Wisdom, and Judgment of the Crusader. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, for Horde players who may not be as familiar, Judgment of Light is a debuff that gets applied to the target, and every melee attack by any player has a chance to restore health. So it's very good on raid-wide damage fights, for example, like Vale in Blackwood Lair, Magmadar in Molten Core, or in Naxxramas, especially Lotheb and Thaddeus, where everyone, all 40 players across the entire raid, are taking major damage. Mm-hmm. So all of the melee players can regen passively as they attack the target. Judgment of Wisdom is the opposite. Obviously, for the casters, they have a chance on their spell cast as well as melee attacks. Now, I'm saying for hybrids in particular here, so Paladins. So whenever they hit the target with a spell, they have a chance to regenerate mana. Now, the red-headed bastard stepchild of the 3 is the final one, and it's known as Judgment of the Crusader, which increases plus holy damage to the target. And this is obviously mainly geared for Alliance, obviously, because we're Paladins only on the Alliance. Mm-hmm. But basically, this is for your rep Paladins, and if you're so, if you so dare, your disciplined smite priests. And the interesting mechanic that I want to test once and for all is whether all 6 ranks of Judgment of the Crusader are stackable. And through my theory crafting research, when I was back on, this is back when Nostalrius was running, I actually found proof from 2005 that the judgments were stackable. And I'll just read you this brief post.
Yeah, go for it.
October 13th, 2005. It says, quote, multiple paladins can stack different ranks of the judgments on the same mob. The last time my raid group killed Ragnaros, we didn't have enough priests to do AoE heals on the rogues. So the 3 paladins in the melee groups coordinated different ranks of Judgment of Light on him, and the rogues and DPS warriors ended up healing themselves a lot. So that's what I'm saying as far as those raid-wide heavy damage fights, such as Ragnaros, where the melee get hit by a lot of damage, or Thaddeus or Lotheb. If you can stack it adds up to quite a lot of passive healing that the healers wouldn't otherwise have to put out.
Right.
Now, as because of that, and then there was also additional evidence that I found from the 2.4.0 patch notes, where it says Judgment of the Crusader. It is no longer possible to have icons for 2 different ranks of Judgment of the Crusader appear at the same time when judged by multiple paladins. Now, the pushback that I got on that was, That's just talking about icons. That's not necessarily saying that the actual debuff stack. But when you put the 2005 post along with the 2.4 patch notes, it makes a compelling argument. Now, back when I think it was on either Elysium or Light's Hope, they decided to nerf the mechanic because they said, well, you haven't found any evidence from 1.9 to 1.12. And that was their argument. I mean, at first, all of my haters, all of my trolls didn't agree that it was even possible in the first place. And they kind of took a big dump on that 2005 post. So what I'm very interested in as far as the BlizzCon demo is that we would have the ability to determine whether at least rank 1 and rank 2 of Judgment of the Crusader can stack, because rank 1 Seal of the Crusader can be learned at level 6 and rank 2 can be learned at level 12.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what we've heard, through the grapevine, it's looking like only one zone per faction would be available. So we're looking at probably Elwyn Forest for the Alliance and
Durotar, perhaps.
Durotar for the Horde. Now with that being said, it is definitely possible to achieve level 12 from just questing and mob killing in Elwyn Forest.
Yep.
So what I would like to test is having 2 Paladins group up. And then seeing they coordinate, one of them do rank 1, one of them do rank 2, and see if in fact those 2 judgments do stack on the target, because that would completely change the meta. And it's as old as time, LOL ret.
Yep.
Shut the fuck up and heal,
yep.
Put your dress on.
But
if this is in fact proven to be accurate, the Ret Paladins would become force multipliers for each other. And what I mean by that is the more Rets you have, the more powerful all of them are.
Yep.
Because if you get 6 Rets with the 3 out of 3 improved Judgment of the Crusader talent, which is plus 15%, then you have the PvP gloves, which is flat plus 20 to Judgment of the Crusader. And then you have a Librum, which comes out, I think it's in 110, which adds an additional plus 33 to Judgment of the Crusader. So if all 6 Paladins coordinate for all 6 ranks of Judgment of the Crusader, and they have the talent, they have the PvP gloves, and the Librum, that ends up adding up to plus 829 holy damage to the target, which is huge when you factor in whether they use Seal of Command, Judgment of Command, Consecration, or if they go the other way and do a spell damage build and use Seal, Judgment of Righteousness, and build that way. One of the other aspects that I will eventually want to test out, although it won't be possible on the demo given the low level of the tunes and itemization, is whether the talent in the Holy Tree improved Seal and Judgment of Righteousness, which on face value says plus 15%. I want to test whether that would also scale with spell damage. So if you have all 6 ranks of Judgment of the Crusader plus 829 holy damage, and then you have improved Seal, Judgment of Righteousness plus 15%, but then scaling with your gear, that's going to be some huge, huge damage. Especially given the fact that Seal of Righteousness cannot be dodge, block, parried, and cannot be resisted either fully or partially.
So it sounds like, I mean, one of the things that you're looking forward to finding out most. And thank you for that phenomenal in-depth answer, by the way. That was absolutely fantastic.
Sorry, was that too long-winded,
No,
or did that?
Please believe me, on this show, there is no such thing as too long. That was absolutely phenomenal. But it sounds like, I mean, to crudely summarize what you're saying, it sounds like if things did stack in the way that perhaps you might be hoping, it would give rise to the situation essentially where it's like, with our powers combined, we are Captain Retribution.
Well, exactly. And I said as much in our PMs, and it alludes back to the forum post on the classic forums that I wrote, I think a year ago now. Basically, it's proc items plus Judgment of the Crusader stacking plus spell damage. Basically, when you combine all of that with those proc items like the Fiery Retributor sword that drops from the demon boss in ZG, the Blaze Fury medallion, which drops off of Kazakh, the world boss, and either the Fiery Plate gauntlets or Storm gauntlets, which are blacksmith craftable items. Each of those items are plus elemental damage on every one of your melee attacks, and they are equip bonuses. So that means they will always proc. And then when you use Seal of Righteousness and Judgment of Righteousness, those also proc melee procs as well. So you have Fire Retributor, which is 1.8 swing speed, plus Seal of Righteousness on top. Basically, you're getting those procs go off every 0.9 seconds if you separate the two. But we want to also further test whether those scale with spell damage, because I have proof from the different database websites. They're saying, yeah, they scale, yeah, they scale, yeah, they scale. But those posters who wrote those particular pieces, that was not during actual retail vanilla. So that was a pushback, because I originally had them quote unquote fixed back on Phoenix, and it got ugly fast because it led to what's known as the fire rogue. Basically, all the Nax clearing guilds, the rogues started taking all the spell damage items. Now, keep in mind, Phoenix also had a pay shop. So not only could you vote to guarantee to get the Fiery Retributor with vote points, but you could do a real money transaction and buy all of the cloth Nax caster gear. So you had these rogues doing, like, they were one-shotting tier 3 prot warriors in Warsong Gulch. Wow. Like, I'm not kidding.
Wow.
It was just boom, you're dead. Boom, you're dead. Mm-hmm. Boom, you're dead. And then in PvE, one of the community managers posted a video that he used to test the Fire Rogue on their test realm, and the Fire Rogue was doing like 2,600 DPS. It was just stupid, insane. But according to the evidence, it said that they should scale at standard instant cast scaling, which is 43%. But it ended up breaking the game, and it was reverted back 3 weeks later to not scale at all.
Right. Now, we sort of, recently I've been talking on the show, and I've been hit with some feedback about, obviously private server information versus vanilla. A lot of us don't remember how it was back in vanilla in regards to perhaps, some of the stuff that you've just talked about. It might be obviously private server based and blah, blah, blah. But in terms of, the accuracy of private servers, I sort of preface everything with like, look, we all know it's not 100% correct information. I don't feel the need to state that at the start of every episode, that we all take it with a grain of salt, what happens on private servers in regard to theory crafting. But keeping like that caveat in mind, obviously, with regards to some of the playtime that you've had on private servers, are there any other, Paladin-related arguments or Paladin-related issues that, outside of what you've spoken about, you're also dying to find out about later in game that you might not be able to obviously pick up in the demo as well?
I am actually able to say because I played on all sorts, and I played on servers where it's basically stock mangoes or maybe one or two steps above stock mangoes. And let me put it this way: in stock mangoes, which is what all private vanilla servers, for lack of a better term, are based on, Paladins were the worst and most bugged class of all. It was just atrocious. I'm talking holy resistance. I'm talking seal of command being on the spell, hit, and crit table. You name it. And, we also had positive bugs where we had the unnerfed seal of the Crusader and then consecration scaling with attack power. Yeah, that was nice, but it wasn't Blizz-like. But that being said, I can tell you that because of my years of blood, sweat, and tears and swearing at a lot of people on the forums and in the bug reports, Light's Hope has it pretty close to 100% Blizz-like as far as retribution goes. And it's come a long way, and I had to kick a lot of people's teeth in verbally to get them to listen and say, no, you're got your head up your ass, you're wrong. This is how it was. This is how it should be. So I think we're as close as Blizz-like as we're ever going to get on any private server on Light's Hope. It took a long time, but and I wrote up a lot of bug reports, and I had to deal with a lot of haters and trolls in the process. But I think we're close. If we're able to get these final, unanswered staking points, for example, for judgment stacking, the fire proc items, improve seal of righteousness talent, we will be able to finally close the book. And here's a little shout out to Kef Tank. We will finally be able to properly stat weight Paladins. He's been chomping at the bit for me and Taligil to get that done. Mm-hmm. But those are until we actually get classic, we can't finish off the chapter, I guess is the best way to put it. And and now that being said, I've been trying for literally years. I have submitted GM tickets to Blizzard, asking the very questions that and issues that we talked about in this interview right now. And obviously, they did not want to give out the information because any information that they would have given out would have been only used to help private servers, and obviously at that time, they wanted nothing to do, and they wanted to shut them all down. So at long last, starting with the demo during BlizzCon, and then once Classic actually opens up and people are able to level up, take all the necessary talents, and then get all these items that we want to test out, we'll finally be able to know once and for all where things actually stand when it comes to retribution. And it's basically its top DPS ceiling and where it will play out compared to other classes and specs.
It's definitely going to be very interesting when everything drops. And you mentioned a few times, having to correct people on the forums and things like that. And I've just seen in the last few days, actually, you are incredibly vocal on the official forums, and a lot of your posts are really well put forward and really well constructed arguments. Just sort of lightly on forum use in general, and obviously the re-establishment of the official classic forums and whatever we might get when the game releases. I talk to people about the way in which you've always approached the forums and how much you use them and what you hope to achieve with such heavy official forum use, and why you choose the official forums over any other avenue.
Well, I've never been a fan of Reddit. That's number one, although I have used it sparingly because it's where the trolls and haters live. But I can tell you this. One thing that I learned very quickly was that Blizzard official forums do, in fact, enforce their code of conduct very, very quickly and very, very efficiently. So you got to be really careful. Incoming four-letter word. Don't call people on the official classic forums. You'll get a 2-week timeout real quick. Yeah, and then like some trolls were I actually reported this one guy multiple times on multiple different forum accounts, and he kept harassing me, and basically he kept getting banned because he was just trying to troll me, and I kept reporting him, and basically the guy was just start up new forum accounts circumventing his bans, and it was just hilarious the way he just kept coming after me. But it was just like his arguments were stupid. This is the guy that said that, because remember, I don't know if you were in Telejo's Discord at the time when we were first looking at Nightfall uptime.
No, I glazed over it, but I didn't catch much of it. Okay,
well, KefTank was testing. I'm a Mac. I use a Mac, so I didn't have the test server at the time because I had to set up a partition and install Windows in order to do it. But KefTank was the main guy doing it, and I was posting results on the official forums, and this guy said, "Oh, you're full of crap. Oh, you're just private server garbage." And he said that a melee hunter with Nightfall, without his pet, just the melee hunter would hit 1.1k DPS. And I was just like, what the hell are you smoking? But he just wouldn't let it go. He's like, no. But I mean, even KefTank using corrupted Ashbringer tapped out at 1k.
Oh.
So, but that's with his pet too. But this guy on the forum said just the melee hunter himself, no pet, would hit 1.1. And then he's like, "Oh, just give it to the Fury Warriors." But then we're like, the tests show that the Fury Warrior would get a bit more uptime, but his personal DPS would go down by 500 or 600 in the process. And so it would end up being a net loss because like on a target like Patchwork, a Fury Warrior can hit 15, 16, close to 1700 DPS with best in slot forever gear. And that's using dual wield with KT weapons. But if you give him Nightfall, his DPS is going to go down to 900. So what's the point of an extra few seconds of Nightfall if you end up losing 500, 600, 700 DPS from that one player alone? Like it ends up becoming stupid.
As I said, I should say to you, actually, I do apologize because I said to you this would be, 10 to 15 minute call. And you've been so amazing that, as often happens on the show, this is now turning into a much longer call. And I'm more than happy to go long, obviously, with the content that you're providing being so interesting.
Well, if I can just interrupt you for a quick second, that's the beauty of the vanilla Paladin. There's no one way to play it. And that's what from day one, I have always advocated, try a different spec, try different abilities, find what works best for you. My number one priority was to empower others to embrace the full, toolbox that we have with us. I mean, let me put it this way. If we wanted it easy, we'd be playing BFA right now and jumping into LFR and waiting in the capital city.
Yeah.
So like that's the beauty of the class, of the different specs. You can play around. It's a virtual smorgasbord of different things that you can do.
Just generally outside of, everything that you've mentioned, and if, let's say for some reason, Retribution Paladins did become more viable than they currently are, do you think, are you just as excited as anyone to be able to take that dress off and actually re-explore ways in which to play the class and up that DPS?
Well, let me answer it this way. Back in retail vanilla, I was in the top rating guild on Lane server. And we ended up stopping rating about 2 months before Burning Crusade came out, which was January of 2007, I believe. So we stopped rating as a guild around October, beginning of November.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't end up clearing all the way to Kel'Thuzad. But we were one of the later servers that opened up. It wasn't one of the first generation. And I myself came to the game, I think about 4 or 5 months after it opened up. So I was a bit late to the game myself. So, but that being said, we were the top guild on the server. And when we ended up, I believe we were 9 out of 15 Naxxramas. And we had 6 or 7 full-time rating Paladins, give or take, depending on the day, on people's schedules. On average, we had about 4 or 5 Paladins per raid. Of those 6 or 7 Paladins, we only had one that was holy.
Oh.
The other one, my buddy, my actual good buddy, and here's a fun story. I had never met him, but he came to my wedding.
Oh, wow.
It's a true story. Mikey, really good guy. My wife and I, we got married in Hawaii, and Mike was a Marine. He was stationed on Oahu, and our wedding was on the Big Island. He came over for our wedding. And that's when fantastic. I met him I literally met him for the first time the night before I got married. And, it was a lot of fun. But, he was the Paladin class leader, and he wasn't even full holy. He was 21 prot for Blessing of Sanctuary. Every one of the other Paladins, guess what spec we were?
Well, you're all red.
Exactly.
Wow.
Because you don't need to be 31 plus holy in order to use Flash of Light or Holy Light. And we got 9 out of 15 Nax. So that's what I say to all these min-max. I mean, look, if people want to min-max and speed run, fill your boots, have fun, but that doesn't interest me. But don't tell me that you have to be 31 plus holy in order to clear Naxxramas.
It's definitely the min-maxing argument, I think, is one that will slightly fall by the wayside, because it's always going to be there as, yes, okay, well, no one is disputing if you want to take down the content in the best way possible. Yeah, sure, there's a cookie cutter way of doing things. But to then shut down skilled players who want to play alternative, less viable specs or classes in a raid situation, I think it's going to become pretty obvious pretty soon that you can still do it. Sure, you might not be able to do it as quickly or, with a bit more difficulty, maybe a wipe or two thrown in, but it's not like you can't do it. Would you agree with that? I mean, obviously sounds like you
100%. 100%. Now, that being said, in our guild raids, we didn't break out our two-handers and start using Seal of Command. We still healed, but we weren't 31 plus down the holy tree in the process. Because we as a guild would PvP together, and it was so amazing. I still got some of my old screenshots from original vanilla Alterac Valleys with me and my guild mates. We were all 5 out of 5 Avenger armor, and we all had Nax weapons, and we were force multipliers for one another in Alterac Valley. We would literally hold off a group of 20 plus horde from being able to kill Belinda just by ourselves. And we would coordinate our stuns to drop our max rank Judgment of Commands, and we would just stack all of our consecrations on top of each other in the mass, and we would just destroy the horde.
Outside of Paladins, I mean, obviously you sound like someone who's so incredibly well versed with Paladins and their role in the game. Do you roll any alts? What's the sort of second class that you've always been intrigued by, or rolled as an alt?
On the private server here for Light's Hope, I also have a very geared Fury Warrior that I have Ash Candy on. And basically, I roll two-hand Fury. And so, for example, when I used to raid, on fights where it just wasn't feasible for me to be there with my ret, so fights like, Hagen Dance, because of his annoying mana burn / detonation mechanic, basically it's very difficult for ret to do well on that fight. So basically the only way you can stay in is if before the boss is pulled, you have to heal yourself and drain your mana bar completely. Otherwise he's just going to end up blowing you up. So in those situations, for the good of the guild, I would just log out of my Paladin and bring in my Fury Warrior, because obviously the Fury Warrior can stay in the whole time. And likewise, sometimes I just bring him in for Noth. But the Paladin can still play in on Noth. But basically, I would bring the Fury Warrior in for Noth, Hygen, and sometimes Resuvius, because Resuvius also does that shout that you can't be in line of sight for otherwise as a mana user. But yeah, those are the two geared tunes that I have on Light's Hope.
So given how active you are with theory crafting in relation to Paladins, do you find that does extend to this Fury Warrior as well, or other specs? Is it theory crafting in general that you've always wanted to dabble in, or are you just focused on the plight of the Paladin?
It's been the Paladin through and through. I mean, I enjoy playing my Fury Warrior. It's fun, but by no means am I an expert. I am absolutely atrocious playing my warrior in PvP. I mean, I can kind of stumble around fine, but I much prefer playing my Paladin, especially playing, like Reckoning spec, and being able to provide that full package and being able to one-shot the enemy flag carrier with a well-timed wreck bomb there's nothing better. Like, warriors can have their sword spec proc, but nothing beats dropping that wreck bomb with Seal of Righteousness and Corrupted Ashbringer and getting a nice juicy life drain crit, which scales at 100% spell damage, I should add. On that target, and nothing beats that. That's the satisfying part of basically all these people are saying, "Oh, shut the fuck up and heal me, LOL ret," and then being able to one shot the flag carrier. It just came to my mind. One of the other things that Keftank and I were just recently testing, as far as the theory crafting hat, was the smite spec for discipline priests. So that was interesting, and then. Obviously, this kind of flows back to the judgment stacking of all 6 ranks of Judgment of the Crusader. If that ends up becoming Blizz-like, then it does open the door for potential smite spec priests, at least on the Alliance side. So that's one of the things that both he and I were trying to test out and see where things go.
You've been fantastic, Dolores, and I tell you what, you've certainly wet the beak, so to speak, for the next episode that we'll get you on regarding everything and anything Paladin. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. You've clearly got a lot to say, and I always enjoy getting the theory crafters on here because it's one of those episodes where I listen and I sit there and I nod along, and I'm sitting there realizing, like, I know I'm going to have to listen to this a second time because so much of it flies over my head.
Well, this flows back to what I said earlier. That's the beauty of vanilla Warcraft. There's no one way to do it, especially as a Paladin. And if we wanted it easy, like I said, we'd be playing Battle for Azeroth right now, where literally everything is handed to you. And, it's completely dumbed down. So you can't really theory craft in the retail current version of the game. I mean, yeah, there's going to be different changes as they do DPS changes to abilities, et cetera, but it's so dumbed down that basically all the classes are the same. I mean, when do you still play retail? I
tried BFA when it came out, and I got like 2 levels into it and just went, I'm not having fun. And, I just left.
Oh, I see an angry burb has entered the channel.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't want to alarm you, but Thaloris, we are currently with company. Ladies and gentlemen, the man himself, whose name we've been dropping like it's going out of fashion, Keftank, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
I'm okay.
Excellent. Well, that's good enough. Well, look, here's what we'll tell you. Dolores has been dropping bombs of theorycrafting here regarding Paladins and the demo, and he talked about a few things that he's looking forward to finding out about. And you're someone who we've mentioned is so vocal through a number of Discords, obviously Taladrill's Discord, Theorycrafting Discord, the Countdown to Classic Discord, and I do enjoy hearing your take on things, and obviously you're quite involved in the theorycrafting side of things as well. What are you hoping to find out first and foremost from the demo? And I know you're not overly interested in sort of the demo, so to speak, in terms of how limited it's going to be, but is there any one little thing that you're kind of curious about discovering from when we get to play that?
Realistically, yeah, the only thing I'm interested in is, I guess, the debuff priority. And then maybe how, Soloris was talking about it a little bit earlier, but, judgment stacking, but, just in general, the priority list. Obviously we have a limited amount of skills that we can activate, which will give us a sense of, like, how does Fireball really get pushed off, and like, when does Moonfire get pushed off? Those are low priority debuffs, but, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how right we got it with the NOS core.
Yeah, because you go way back to NOS. You were on the QA team for there.
Yeah, other than that though, is this demo with 8 debuff slots? Is it with 16? Even if it is with 8 or 16, it doesn't really mean that Blizzard won't do limit like the 8 debuff slot when they do launch Classic. I think this is just mostly like a marketing bit, as well as kind of a stress test. See how much people are truly interested in it.
Cash grab. Hey, it's good business for them. It's going to increase their bottom line for Q4 or for the year. You gotta respect them for doing it.
Well, you know what they say, there's no business like show business and WoW Classic demos. I think that's how the line goes.
I'd be curious to see the armor reduction to damage formula, if we got that right as well. Mm-hmm. Again, very limited on what we can see, because maybe the demo only goes to level 10, and then we won't even be able to test if like judgment stacking is a thing. But
well, they did say that players would be able to spend a few talent. So I'm going to take them at their word, but I do agree. It's not set in stone, so I'm hoping we can at least get to level 12.
So, Keftank, one thing I'd ask you is that, we've obviously got BlizzCon coming up as well, and you've been tagging me in a couple of things and excitedly talking amongst the Druid Discord and the Theorycrafting Discord as things you'd like to hear perhaps from the Classic panel. But, there might well be a section where they turn to Q&A and taking questions from the floor, and they've had a couple of famous moments in the past. But one thing I'd ask you is if you did have your chance to ask a question from the floor to the Classic panel, what would that question be?
So I would probably ask them around the design philosophy of vanilla, and if they are going to kind of stay true to that with Classic. I think the major call out in regards to that would be around how the private server meta has kind of figured out and turned to a very melee oriented game. We've dissected and analyzed vanilla to reveal that it is not a caster's game whatsoever. Arguably, with that said, maybe we did not get it right on the private servers, and I'm almost certain we did not, but to what degree did we not get it right? What is that ratio? We know, from me working on Nost itself, that there are bosses and monsters that have higher armor values than what is intended in vanilla. And so that's just going to increase that gap for the melee in classic. And I'm just curious, if they are just going to roll it out as is and let the community develop that meta even further and really phase out the prot warrior, phase out the warlocks, phase out all the suboptimal casters, shadow priests, balanced druids, elemental shamans, whatnot. I mean, they're pretty phased out as is from even 2006, but yeah, I mean, it just really encompasses a lot. Like with world buffs, it's a big topic, and I'm just really curious if they understand that the hardcore side of this community has kind of figured out the game in terms of optimizing it to see the best returns. Because, you know, I mean, people are, they're fools if they think that what we have developed here on the private server community in terms of the meta is not going to carry over into classic. And that's going to kind of be the model and the outline for everyone that's going to raid in classic. They're going to lean on us to find out what we figured out on these private servers, even though they may have not been 100% accurate, and they're going to use that as a model.
Well, if I can pick you up on that one, because I know this is going to be a very contentious point for a few people, not for me personally. I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I've had a lot of people write into the show, and I was mentioning this to Thaloris earlier, saying, you know, I do get people up in arms saying, you know, Josh, you are putting way too many people with way too much private server experience on your show. That is not vanilla. You are misrepresenting information. This is outrageous. Please throw in a massive legal caveat at the start of the show, or, you know, something along those lines, that this is, you know, all speculation, blah, blah, blah. And I've always said to people, look, we know that it's can go unsaid because we know that private server data isn't necessarily spot on. But something you just said was very intriguing when you were saying that you'd be a fool to think that the private server metadata won't necessarily won't translate over to classic. You're thinking that it's pretty much going to be the same thing. And please correct me if I'm paraphrasing or putting anything you've said incorrectly. But on that point, I know that people listening right now will be going, "What the fuck? That Kef Tank guy is out of control." They'll be using the Blizz-like numbers that those private servers never had access to. It'll be so different, and all you theory crafters will have to go away and do all your work again. But it sounds like you're saying perhaps not so.
I mean, yes, things aren't going to be a one-to-one carbon copy. That's the problem with emulation, and we tried really hard to get it to that point. But for instance, we know from vanilla what the armor reduction formula is. We know how that translates to, increase of damage. So just as a quick example, Ragnaros or Patchwork, they have 5491 armor. And if you reduce that, a 25% damage reduction or increase, a 25% damage increase is about a 3600 armor reduction. And that's very obtainable to acquire in 2018, almost 2019. We know how that will translate to how, melee hits scale or, yellow hits scale. It's not like, even if it was wrong, we just need to readjust. We have all these great theory crafters with their spreadsheets out there that can just readjust the stat weights for their skills, for their spells to whatever the formula actually is if we did get it wrong, if we did get coefficients wrong. But we don't, we didn't get coefficients wrong. We definitely have spell resistance wrong. So it's going to value spell penetration more for casters. But these people who think that, these people don't know exactly how much work and what we have done on the back end of things that they do not see, in our QA forms, like the math behind it, dissecting a video to get these results. Yes, it's not a one-to-one carbon copy.
Not only that, Keftank, if I could just add one thing, they're lumping all of the private servers into the same batch.
Yes.
So they're saying, stock mangoes or Nostalrius or Elysium or Light's Hope, they're all the same. They're just like vanilla game. It's all BS because obviously stock mangoes is horribly bugged. Right? That's the starting point. That's where you roll up your sleeves, and all of these developers and theory crafters have kind of started licking their chops, say, okay, let's get to work. Let's fix this. Let's look at the data that's in stock mangoes. Let's go back to the vanilla evidence. Let's look at the vanilla era videos, and let's fix it.
Exactly.
Very, very well put, guys. If I can just sort of tie off the call, I'll bring up one last point. And Keftank, I won't sort of have you have jumped in here for no reason. You've raised some fantastic points, but just to sort of make the most of my time with you while I've got you. In regards to the demo, everyone who knows you knows that you lean druid quite heavily. You are quite in tune with that class. You play them a lot, in particular, balanced druids. Is there anything from the demo, anything at all that you're intrigued about with druids?
No.
I guess
not really.
It's true.
I guess it really depends on how high levels you can get.
Yeah, exactly.
I can get bear form at level 10. Great. Whatever. If I can't get to 20, I'm going to be stuck in caster form or bear form.
Can I answer? This is a shout out to Taladrill.
Yeah.
Their crowd pummeler works in feral form. Hint, 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 hint. But that's level 30-ish.
Yeah,
right.
That's what, I guess, definitely like, sites like Wowhead is going to data mine the shit out of the demo, but Blizzard's not dumb. They are probably going to restrict some of that data in the demo. Or maybe they'll just give it all to us, and then we'll be able to, parse the database. But,
did you guys hear that Wowhead is coming out with a classic database?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're resurrecting Thoughtbot.
Yeah, I saw that as well. Yeah, it should be interesting. Well, look, I won't sort of put you on the spot too much more, Keftank. I know I essentially got you in here at the last second before you sort of knew what we were talking about. But thanks so much.
Now you got me fucking riled up.
Well, no, that's good. I tell you what. No. While you're riled up, let's get one last point in. Because it's funny because people who either see you around the Discords, obviously you're, how do I term this? You're relatively active and passionate on the Discords, and you speak in a certain way, and you love to get into a back and forth with people, and I like to see you fired up. And when you come on the show, you're so measured, you're so calm in all the points that you put forward. But now that you're riled up, go nuts. What are you riled up about? Tee off.
It's just, when I have to speak about vanilla WoW outside of the Theorycraft community, I just have to think about the community that actually plays this game. And that itself frustrates me beyond belief. I actually had an encounter today out in the real world, which may not want to go out in the real world anymore. But it was some 20-year-old kid. I was wearing my Twitch hoodie, and he thought that was, permission for him to strike up a conversation with me, and which is ridiculous.
Little did he know.
Yeah, I know, right? So he did it, and he's asking me what games I play and whatnot, or if I was a streamer, and I'm not. But I made a joke about Fortnite, and then I told him I don't really play video games, but I am looking forward to Classic. He plays BFA, but he's some 20-year-old kid, and we got into talking about, the evolution of WoW, so to speak, and, what I play in vanilla, and he's very much attuned with the community's perspective of, Balanced Druid is a meme, Moonkin is a meme. And this kid's like, again, he's has to be 20 or so. He's probably still in fucking diapers when vanilla was out. Like, where does he have, like,
still sucking at the teat.
Yeah. But so it's just like, I know I mentioned this in the meme podcast or whatever, but it's that vanilla stigma has, like, this guy did not play vanilla 100%. He was 4, 5, 6 years old
and yet felt the need to comment.
Yeah. I mean, that stigma has carried on probably through the shit classic forums or some shit Reddit forum, or, from his shithead friends down to him. And he has decided to formulate an opinion that has absolutely no basis or factual evidence. And he's just regurgitating it back to effect. Essentially, he's telling anyone he wants to. Obviously, he came up to me and thought he had the right to speak to me. Like, what the fuck? Like, and he just wants to share his, like, I don't know. It's like, that is who I envision, the community as. Obviously it's not all of them, right? But, oh my God, it's so frustrating. Like,
I'm really hoping this story ends with you saying, and now I'm wanted for murder.
Well, can I ask both of you guys a question? How has, in your point of view, the community changed? Let's take a step back from the game itself, but the community, the forums. How, in your opinions, have things changed from original classic vanilla to today, and the years of, as Keftank was just saying, the memes, the LOL Moonkin, LOL Ret. How has that affected the average player, and how will that affect the average player once classic launches?
I mean, I can tell you from a filthy scrub standpoint, because I do feel like I somewhat represent the average player, because I am a filthy casual. I'm not a raider. I'd only, invest so many hours in the game when I can get away from work. But I can tell you that had I not done this podcast, I regret to say that I would have bought all the opinions that I would have read on the forums, because unfortunately for you guys who do such hard work with your theory crafting out there to disprove all of these, stereotypes about meme specs and things like that, the posts that you put up are unfortunately few and far between, as opposed to the waterfall and the avalanche of people going like, ha ha ha, Moonkin's a meme spec. Ha ha ha, Ret Paladins are the worst fucking thing to ever happen to video gaming. Things like that. And the people that are actually vouching for them and crunching the numbers and saying, look, I know it's fun to say that, but if you just actually put these things under the microscope, give them a go, crunch some numbers, you'll see that viability is a very sort of subjective term. You can play these things and have fun and get through the content. I wouldn't have come across that. You know what I mean? I've only, through my vast amount of time spent on the forums through the show and breaking everything down, sounds like that's the police coming for Keftank as they go by in the background here. But, I can tell you that from the average person, I would have bought into all those bullshit lines, which would infuriate you guys.
Well, if I can just add a little caveat here. For me, I have had so many Paladins, both in-game, on the forums, or in direct messages. They're like, dude, you should do a YouTube channel. You should stream. You should get out there. And even my wife has actually, even though she hates this game, and she's actually listening to me being interviewed, probably shaking her head and, cursing me and both of you by proxy. But she said, why don't you make some money streaming? And honestly, I don't want to, because of the hatred. I mean, back on Phoenix, I got doxxed. People hated me and my efforts so badly that they fucking doxed me. Like, that's how bad people are compared, and that's why it flows back to your experiences from the community back in circa 2005, 2006, to the private shitstorms that, like, you go on the Lights Hope Discord terms of service, that's funny. Like that doesn't exist. And, it's a complete, change.
Yeah, I actually don't even think the community has really evolved much. I think there's just more of the dog shit people, and there's more ways for them to communicate and share their dog shit ideas. Arguably, there are more ways for, stupid dumb fucks like myself to share stupid dumb fuck ideas like balanced truth to everyone as well. But I don't know. The internet isn't a library. It's just a dumpster. And people, it's just,
Well, if I could play devil's advocate and go into I'll argue against you for a second, Keftank, with that one. When we say things like, I know that the community gives you the shits with the work you do, and obviously the amount of opinions that fly in the face of the efforts that you put in. But I know it's easy to say, fuck the community, they don't listen to me. I'm sitting here literally trying to help them and prove them wrong in terms of stereotypes, and they will not take this information on board. I totally see where you're coming from. But I'll also say that in general, whilst, interaction and the thirst for knowledge may not be there with every player, I still think it's a generally kind-hearted community, if you will, on the whole. I think the absolutely pervading assholes are still the minority. So I'm still quite happy with the community being full of, wide-eyed, happy people just looking to play the game and get along with each other. But I do completely see where you're coming from, that does not necessarily encapsulate an open-mindedness to taking on further knowledge and breaking down what the game actually means.
Sure. And, I'll agree. There's many different aspects of this community. There's a community that doesn't want to raid, right? And yeah, it would be wrong of me to, call them or lump them in with the rest of the community that I disdain. So yeah, I will recognize that fact. But it is, so, I'm very loud and very vocal about my points, and it's those people that are similar to me that are screaming their heads off, but they don't have any factual evidence to back up their claims. And here I am screaming my head off, but I'm actually speaking to a point. That's the side of the community.
And we provide proof, but even at that point, they say, those test results are garbage. You're making all that up.
I've got no doubt that theorycrafting.
Frustrating.
I've got no doubt that theorycrafting is an absolutely thankless job, and it must be difficult at times for sure.
Well, this doesn't even. This goes well beyond just WoW, but it's 2018. People have somehow seemingly lost the respect for experts in the world. They, if it's not right to them in front of their faces, then they argue I'm not going to bring up political stuff or anything like that, but god damn, it's widespread and it carries into the WoW community.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's the kind of, god damn, this community is so bad in that regard.
Yeah,
in those regards. Right. I see what
you're saying in terms of I know what you mean in terms of if it feels wrong, then it'll be wrong to them regardless of what's on the piece of paper in front of them. I hear you on that one.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm not trying, Balanced Druid is shit in terms of DPS. Retribution Paladin is garbage. Smite Priest is garbage. Shadow Priest is garbage. I don't care. I'm not trying to advocate these specs onto people. I'm not saying, hey, you need to open a spot for this suboptimal spec.
Right.
But I'm trying to just correct that stigma, that stereotype, give the actual story behind it with the math. But it's these people are just, unless they do it themselves, they're not going to be convinced. And it's
yeah, the great irony is, Shadow Priests are considered optimal, but yet all of our testing shows they're not. They're dog shit. The only way that they can be optimal is if they take up a lot of debuff slots. And even then, they're only boosting 3 or 4 warlocks. That's it. Yet
Sure.
they're welcome in raiding guilds.
So I understand this call has now completely deviated into
No, that's fine.
different tangent.
That's totally fine.
But, I mean, this goes back to kind of that question you were posing to me. If I had the opportunity to talk to the QA panel, I mean, the private server community has constructed this meta that is very melee oriented because, so let's just take the 8 debuff slot, system. 5 to 6 debuffs are melee oriented, and that's a crazy amount of debuffs. For casters, you could get, 3 debuffs maybe for them in that 8 debuff slot, but they don't always get those 3 debuffs because those 3 debuffs, holy shit, is that one of your furry? Oh, yeah, furry shit going on here, Nazi. But, geez, how do I follow? What the fuck, Josh?
Sorry, mate. I completely derailed you.
Oh my god.
Debuff slots. Focus.
What else angers Keftank in this community? Fucking this
podcast host with cats.
Furry fetish, like so disturbing. But yeah, I don't. That was so bad. Bad timing. But yeah, now you've just kind of put a damper on my rant there.
I've ruined Christmas.
So now we have figured out how to make Keftank shut up, right?
Well, yeah, I just get a cat and get it to meow. Done.
Yeah, just meow, right?
Well,
fucking cat. I swear to God.
Guys, I might wind up there. I've got another listener who I'm queuing up for the next call. But look, thanks so much to the two of you for coming on. I really do appreciate the theory crafting side of things. Even though, my brain doesn't quite comprehend all of it, I love to hear about it, and I know a lot of the listeners do. So thank you to both of you again for coming on. Keftank, I hope it's not the last time we hear from you. And quite frankly, despite the cat issues, but, also Thaloris, we're going to be hearing back from you when we do Paladins. And I just want to say thank you so much to both of you.
Thanks for having us. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, we've got another caller on the line now, and it's a return caller. Fred Monroe, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure. And I also want to thank you again for all those great interviews you did. Like in particular, that Kevin Jordan one was really shed a lot of light on, what the developers intended, especially the developers for the classes, really for Vanilla WoW. I thought that was actually super interesting.
No, my absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for listening. That was definitely one of the interviews that a lot of people seem to respond to, and it really resonated with people in terms of some of the interpretations that I've seen flying around on the forums now as a result of that. It really gave people a chance to kind of read between the lines and also get some better insight into the minds of the devs and the philosophies that went into some of the class design. So a lot of people really appreciated that. It's sort of hearing things that they've wanted to hear for years, and to have some of them finally confirmed was really quite cathartic to a lot of people. So, no, thank you for listening. But, you've obviously been on the show before, and speaking of calls that resonated with people like that Kevin Jordan one, please, be aware that your call resonated with a lot of people as well. I got a bit of feedback about your phone call last time. We spoke for about half an hour on a number of things. We spoke about, warriors. We talked about shamans. And people got back to me and said, like, fuck me dead, that guy knows his stuff. And I was like, yeah, we got to get him back sometime. So here you are. And you messaged me with a topic that you'd like to hit on, and that was something that I've actually not really thought of or heard of much before, and that was something that you refer to as the Nostalrius mod pack. What can you tell us about that?
Right. I think a mod pack, I think a lot of people might use that as a pejorative term. I don't mean any offense by it. The point is that, a lot of people, especially these private server players, when they're thinking, I want this game with no changes or anything like that, a lot of times they do sort of tacitly understand that, yes, I don't want any changes really, except for some of these changes that Nostalrius did, because they view it, I think quite rightly, as pretty necessary changes to make sure that a 1.12 release of Vanilla WoW actually sort of works. So I think, I don't know if I should just go into it or.
Yeah, no, go for it.
So I think the first and probably the least controversial point is a progressive release. So, in 1.12 in vanilla WoW, all the content was out. I mean, it's just that simple. But that's a bit of a problem. You don't want a game that has, Nax out and has AQ out and has BWL out, has all the battlegrounds, all the rep rewards, and has all this great gear that's added to dungeons later on early in the game, because it really sort of disincentivizes running these earlier dungeons and these raids and sort of, prevents this whole sort of progressive play through the game. So I think that's sort of the first change that most people agree is necessary. And it is a change because obviously using 1.12 talent spells mechanics when there's only like Molten Core and, Nixia out is pretty different than how it actually was back in the day.
Yep.
I guess just to go into some specific problems, I sort of alluded to these, but there's tier 0.5 quests, which have gear, which for a lot of characters is better than their tier 1. Then there's these entry level dungeons, Zul'Gurub, and to some degree AQ20. And then there's also gear that drops from trash in Nax Remanis. So you wouldn't actually even need to clear any bosses in Nax. You could just farm some trash. And with all of these, you'd be able to get gear that's like way better than what you can get even in BWL. So that's a little bit of an issue. And then also, so I guess sort of the reason why Notorious did this progressive release, in particular was for that reason. But then they also went one step further and they actually released Dire Maul later, because Dire Maul similarly has a lot of dungeon gear, which is better than some tier 1 gear, but is also more importantly better than all the other level 60 dungeon gear. So there's a lot of so for casters in particular, if Dire Maul's out, it heavily disincentivizes them running, Strat Undead, Strat Live, Scholomance, BRD, all those top level dungeons. Basically, it'd be much harder to find runs for them, and you wouldn't really have to run them if Dire Maul was out at the very start. So I think that's sort of the first change, namely progressive release, that most people, do think is necessary. But it is, I think it's interesting to note, it is definitely a change from just a pure 1.12 server. I guess the second, sort of major change they did was they actually nerfed, Gold Farm and Dire Maul, which is very important, because there's basically a mage AoE gold farm. And then, of course, there's the famous, Hunter solo tribute run, which people, might know of, where a hunter can actually, dodge all of the enemies basically by using clever use of feign death, and then eventually fight King Gordok at the very end of Dire Maul. And can actually solo him by basically running him around circles on his platform. It's kind of embarrassing for the king, but you get the whole tribute chest to yourself, which has 5 major mana pots, 5 major healing pots, and has gear that you can sometimes sell to people. It's like a rogue, for example, in this Tarnished Elven Ring, or otherwise it's just gear that you can vendor disenchant. And you can make so much more money that way, along with the mage AoE farm, than any other farm in the game, that this leads to this gold inflation that basically ruins the economy on the server. So I think these two changes are very uncontroversial changes that NOS made that I think most people are in favor of. And there's more controversial ones, but I don't know if I should get into those.
Now, in terms of some of those changes that they did make, I know we touch on it all the time, sort of in Discord and things like that. Is there any one in particular that you're really hoping to see in Classic?
Oh, I definitely progressive release. I don't think this is necessary. This is very a non-controversial position.
Oh yeah.
But I think the game would be dead on arrival if there were not a progressive release. So
definitely. Yeah.
If there were one change I was hoping, it'd be that.
Yep. And that's still to this day my greatest shame. When I first started the podcast, even though I do say that I'm still learning about the game as we go along, even though I played back in the day, I've come to learn so much more about the game, obviously through osmosis by doing the show. But one of the positions I had very, very, very early on in single digit episode numbers was I don't see the problem if they just release everything at the start. It's not like you can walk into Naxxramas on day one. Just Blizzard said they don't want to work on Classic. And to be fair to myself, my position was going by what Blizzard has said in terms of we don't want to put too much time, effort and resources into this thing. If that was the case, then the easiest way to do that would be to dump everything on us and basically just go, there's your Classic, idiots, we're out of here, and just walk away. Do you know what I mean? But obviously I've come to learn and have very politely been shown the error of my ways by a number of listeners going, you cannot possibly do that. And now I know the reasons why you can't. So I'm totally with you on that.
Well, I guess we'll see when BlizzCon happens. There's no confirmation one way or the other if they're going to do that or not,
Oh, absolutely. I think it's a presumption that we base on nothing, but it's the presumption sort of that is just spawned from that. Well, it's just bad business if you don't do it that way.
Right, exactly. If you do a trickle release, people are going to stay subscribed. If Nax is out the release, these best, guilds are going to clear it. Like on a conservative estimate, very conservative, they're going to clear it the first month and a half. And it's like, okay, cool. Like now they got their world first and now they're done playing.
It's, obviously the knock of the time now against Blizzard is that, it's all about that time gated content and stuff like that. But, I think this is a little bit different, obviously, to what's happening in BFA, that it seems a bit, unnecessary in BFA, where I think it's actually more than necessary in Classic. So I do see what you're saying. Now, in terms of BlizzCon, and, we've been discussing a lot of BlizzCon lately on the show, obviously with it being just around the corner. Are there any things that you're hoping for to be said or expecting from the demo or anything like that? Are you going to be jumping into the demo?
I probably will not be jumping into the demo. I mean, I am a bit busy right now. Yep. I have more free time than I did last year, but you know my situation here.
Yep.
I mean, I don't want to step on anyone's toes, from what you said in the BlizzCon episode. I think, you really covered most of the major things. I think really I'm just going to be, really tuned in on that discussion and see if they really, if they actually tell us anything about what we should expect regarding any changes. Again, progressive release, I really hope they would say that, or something like that. And then besides that, from the demo itself, we here on the Discord, I wasn't the main part of it, but there was a big compilation of like things to test. And I think one of the most interesting things to test, but perhaps this is just like my nerdy math side, is it'd be interesting to see how the hit tables work.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've had someone go over how the hit tables work on the show, but if they work like they do on Classic, this is going to determine a lot of like balance for the game. I'll just put it that way.
I'll tell you, if you're happy to talk about it, we very, very lightly touched on it when we got the Dev Water Cooler announcement. But if you're in tune with it, I'm more than happy to touch on it now in terms of hit tables.
Sure. I'm just going to give the very, very quick explanation of it. So basically, here's how the hit table works, and hopefully this makes more sense than maybe my normalization explanation. So basically, how hit tables work is sort of imagine a raffle, okay? But there's only 100 tickets that can be sold, and the winner is like whatever hit's going to happen. So what happens is that people basically line up in order to buy these raffle tickets. So the first tickets go to miss. So whatever your miss chance is, those buy the first tickets. So if you have like a 20% miss chance, that buys the first 20 of the 100 tickets. Then dodge, parry, and block in that order come and buy the tickets. Then glancing blows come, and against a level 63 mob, that's 40%. So maybe you have 20% bought by miss if you're like dual wielding and you have really bad hit, and then you have 6 bought by dodge, block, parry, and then you have 40 bought by glancing blows. And then whatever's left is divided between crit and hit. So crit buys next, and then hit is basically just given away for free to whatever's left over at the end. So, imagine a very basic table where you have a 20% miss chance, you have a 20% crit chance. Okay, so you have 20% miss, that buys the first 20 tickets, then the next 6 tickets go to dodge, then the next 40 tickets go to glance, and the next 20 go to crit. And so what's your hit chance? Well, it's whatever's left over from 20 plus 20 plus 40 plus 6, taken away from 100, which is 14, if I'm not mistaken. So that's how hit works. That's how the hit table works. So what's important to know there is basically the order of the tickets in which they're bought. So as you can see, your crit cap in this scenario is only whatever's left over at the end. So if you have a 40% glance chance, and you have a 20% miss chance, and you have a 6% dodge, block, parry chance, that's 66 right there. So your crit cap would only be 34%. Because basically once crit comes, there's only 34 tickets left to be sold to crit because it's very late in line. And so any extra crit would be wasted. But in that scenario, you could never get a regular hit. You can only crit or get a glancing blow or miss or dodge. I don't know if that made any sense, but that's just like the very quick and dirty explanation.
No. Like you did fantastically well, and much like your normalization conversation with me, the second time I hear it, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, now I get it. Now I'm just going to read something to you that came up in Twitch chat from previous interviewee Viv, and I'm not sure if he's trying to state a correction or something you may have missed. I'm not sure, but tell me if this makes any sense to you when I read it back to you. He said, 27% mischance to white attacks with dual wield against level 63 by default without hit gear.
Yeah. So what happens is, your base chance to miss is 5% against an enemy of your level. And then basically there's different formulas that are used. Actually Nost used one for its entire time, and then Elysium used it for half of its time and switched over to a different one. But basically the commonly accepted number is if you have 300 weapon skill and you're fighting a mob with 315 defense skill, your miss chance is 9%. So that 5 goes to 9 depending on the actual math that's used there. And then dual wield adds a base 15% chance. So you have a 9% base miss without any hit plus 15 from dual wields, which gives you a 24% max miss chance against a level 63 mob. He was saying 27%. I mean, again, these private servers all use different math.
Yes.
But as far as I'm aware, it's 15 base from dual wielding penalty, and then 9 is the maximum miss chance, assuming you have 300 weapon skill. So I would say 24 is the max. I mean, again, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's the point that what the actual hit is doesn't affect the math of the hit tables. The tables work that way. And you can play around with the hit. I mean, imagine if you had like a 70% miss chance, for example, and you still had a 40% glance chance. Well, in that situation, you could never crit, because basically the 70 miss would buy the first 70 tickets, and then the glance would buy the remaining 30. And then there'd be then once, crit comes in line, he'd be like, sorry, man, I only had 100 tickets, and, miss bought the first 70 and, glance bought the next 30, right? So you can play around the numbers. You can see how you can calculate the crit cap is basically whatever's left over from 100 once you've got the 40%, glance chance, which is against level 63 mob, and whatever your miss chance and whatever the dodge chance is, which is 6.6.
Well,
anyway.
I must admit, I'm very thankful for the raffle analogy. That's something that will be very, very helpful when I listen to this a second time to digest it fully. But in saying everything that you've just said, and thank you again for that great explanation of the loot tables, realistically, I mean, are you expecting Blizzard to tinker with that at all? When you say you're intrigued to see if in the demo or anything like that, as a result of what we go through, if the loot tables remain unchanged, I mean, surely that's something that would be sacrosanct to Blizzard.
I'm sorry, are we talking about the hit tables or the loot tables?
Oh, sorry, the hit tables, I mean.
Yeah, no problem. Well, again, so the question is it a change? Because what we have is we basically have this Mango's core, and then we have like these various posts we found on forums of people experimenting and trying to figure out for themselves how the hit table actually worked in vanilla. So if it works totally different from a private server, it might not be that they've changed it from vanilla. It just might be that it's different than private servers because the private servers are wrong. So I think that's why a lot of people are peeled on it. And I think, again, I sort of alluded to this previously, but there's actually a lot of controversy over what happens when you get to 305 hit. So how Nostarius did it and how Elysium did it for the first half was basically, so again, remember, if you have 300 hit versus a 315 defense skill enemy, which is, your level 60 going against a level 63 mob or a boss mob, you have a 9% miss chance. Some private servers, Nostarius did this and Elysium did it for the first half, made it so that if you got 305 weapon skill, so that the difference in weapon skill and defense skill is 10 or less, that actually changed the formula that was used for calculating hit, and it actually lowered your miss chance from 9% to 6%. Whereas other formulas that were used for the second half of Elysium, and I imagine what Light Hope and whatever that other and Northfield, that server, I imagine what they use, if they're still using the same formula, would actually change it so that having 5 extra weapon skill, instead of giving you 3% hit, would give you 0.2% hit. And there's a bit of a difference between 3% and 0.2% hit, as you can imagine. Yeah. So again, I see this, and my first reaction isn't, oh, it's going to be a change, whatever comes out in the demo. My first reaction is the private service has got it wrong if it's different than what we sort of were guessing it was before.
All right. Well, Fred Monroe, thank you so much again for dropping in and just unleashing so much amazing information. I mean, as I say, it's information that's readily available to anyone who wants to go and look it up. But I do love the way that you explain it, and you put it so succinctly and easily for us to sort of wrap our heads around. But I appreciate it again. I'm certain it won't be the last time that we talk to you on the show, and thanks for calling in again.
Oh, no, really. Thank you so much for having me. You're too kind.
Okay, we've got another caller on the line now, and who is it that we're speaking with today?
Valder, brother of Minoru, hanging out.
Absolutely, Valder, thank you so much. We've been trying to tee up this call for some time, and as you mentioned, you are the brother of Minoru, a regular on Countdown to Classic, and so remind me at the end of this call, I'll have to get you to say something about Minoru that's a bit teasing in nature while he's not here to defend himself. But until we get to that, you've been brought on because I asked recently if anyone had, much experience with reputation grinds in vanilla World of Warcraft. And thankfully, you were more than ready to talk about that topic, having spent a fair bit of time doing those reputation grinds yourself. So one thing I would ask you just to kick off things generally is, what can you tell the listeners about your experience with rep grinds in Classic?
Well, thinking back on it, I mostly went for reps because I needed stuff to do. You know, we lived way out in the middle of nowhere and there wasn't a whole heck of a lot to do. So I was always looking for little things that I could always do. But when they came out with the Insane title, I realized I may have gone a little too far because I was only missing one reputation from it already. I was only missing the Darkmoon Fair because that, frankly, is just a gigantic money sink and a huge time sink that I never really got around to doing. But for the most part, yeah, I'm thinking I'm pretty good on reputations.
Okay, so why don't we beef up your cred a little bit and just talk people through in terms of Exalted or what have you. Did you get Exalted with everyone, or what did you do? Was there one that got away?
Well, weirdly enough, the only ones that I didn't hit Exalted with were most of the PvP ones. Not because I didn't PvP, but because on Khadgar, the server we were on, Alliance just lost every time. And doing PvP even a dozen times every few days only got me 100 rep each time or something like that. So I just never got around to finishing them.
Okay. And is that something you'd be looking to correct when Classic comes around?
Well, if the PvP balance is a little bit better on the server, then hell yeah, I want to finish off that little check mark.
All right. Well, there's so many, obviously, reputations that you can grind throughout the game, and they all come with, certain rewards or perks, or even just the ability to say that I did it. What's one or two or several of your favorite rep grinds in the game, and why so?
Well, the obvious one that I'm certain Minoru's brought up plenty is, well, the Bloodsail Buccaneers.
Bloodsail Buccaneers, yep.
Yeah. We are both quite possibly the first or second Bloodsail admirals on our server. And it was all for that little hat that summoned a parrot. And it's just a neat little idea. All kinds of people were running by and calling me an idiot for killing the guards. And being melee against those guards is kind of a nightmare, because if you're not standing in just the right spot when they spawn, they'll pull out their guns. And the guns have this massive knockback to them that shoots you up into the air. And the moment one of them shoots you, they're all like, oh shit, I can't find this guy. And they'll pull out their guns and they'll just pin you to a wall. You're just floating there waiting to die. There's nothing you can do.
So outside of Bloodsail, anything else that you enjoyed?
Well, I think most anything from a dungeon was super fun for me, but that's just because I really liked raiding. If you're wanting to do reputations, raiding's obviously a big part of it. And one thing I always got a bit of a kick out of is just how little they cared that you were completely destroying their enemies, because Ragnaros himself only gives 200 reputation for the Hydraxian Waterlords. They don't give a shit that you killed them.
So in terms of sort of frustrations that you've just raised, is there, outside of that, are there any rep grinds that you are absolutely shuddering at the thought of doing again?
The Chendralar and Timbermaw hold, I think, and the Cenarian Circle too. If you're not a druid, that reputation's just a bit of a nightmare. It's just killing a bunch of Silithis and running AQ and Dire Maul and all them. Timbermaw is over-farmed because everybody wants their enchantments and patterns that you get, and that little trinket that summons your little Furbolg buddy. He's kind of useless, but he's nice to have.
Were there any rewards that outside of your lovely Bloodsail hat that gave you your little parrot friend, were there any rewards that you felt were a must and you prioritized in terms of reputation grinds?
As much of a pain as it was to get Darkmoon Fair up to Exalted, most every class has a best in slot from the decks that you get from turning in the deck relevant to your class. I think for Warriors, it wasn't Deck of the Beast. I think that was the one that gave you damage on a hit, something like that. But Darkmoon Fair, the cards are always really big. Thorium Brotherhood giving you the Hammer of Ragnaros. I can't quite recall what it was. It's not the Hand of Ragnaros yet, but the one you get right before that to combine with the Eye of Sulfuras. The Sulfuran Hammer. I just looked it up real quick.
Are there any kind of tips that you would give to people who maybe have never played vanilla or never played, never gone through, let's say they either haven't played the game at all or they've played the game but they haven't played vanilla and they're new to all this reputation stuff? Any tips that you would say, you know what, this is the one that you should really go for first if you're a bit of a beginner because it's a bit of fun, it's got a good reward, anything like that?
The one that I think is still really handy for everybody is going to be your AV reputation. As much as people seem to hate AV, getting the immovable objects, the unstoppable force, it was the cheapest mount to get at the time. That's why I went up to get it. I wanted that RAM and I ran with it. That's definitely would be my first go-to for any fresh 60, or I think you can go into AV, it's 51 to 55.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely that.
In terms of, did you happen to raid Naxxramas at all?
I was exalted with the Argent Dawn when Naxxramas came out, so I could go in there, but my guild wasn't quite up to snuff quite yet. The only boss that I killed in there is Mr. Bigglesworth.
Well, I was going to say that the Argent Dawn rep grind is one that, at least in my mind, seems to get mentioned the most because we obviously hear from so many raiders who wanted to get to Nax and they do their thing with the Argent Dawn. Is there anything in particular, any fond memories that you have or any commentary you had in regards to gaining that rep with the Argent Dawn?
Well, Argent Dawn itself isn't a very complicated reputation. It's just a bit annoying.
Yeah.
But being a tank, as I was at the time, everybody wants to run Skullomance or Sholomance or Stratholm or Human or Undead side, and all of those will give reputation for Argent Dawn. And most people hit 60 in Eastern Plaguelands anyway. I personally hit it in Silithus, but that's just because I like bugs.
In terms of your plans for Classic, so you've been there, you've done it all before. Are you going to do it all again, or are there some reps that you've now said, you know what, I'm just not putting in the time, it wasn't worth it, I've got my ones on my list circled and the others can just go away?
I definitely think I'm going to be getting as much as I can up to Exalted again, just because I like the grind. It's a nice simple thing, put on a podcast, put on a video on your second monitor and just zone out and go for it. Plus, to me, the idea of reputations is kind of ingrained in the character. I don't think I thought of this when I was younger and I was farming them, but in my mind, the character you're playing is supposed to be a hero, right? And people like heroes. And if a hero just walks into town, knocks over someone's dinner and says, pay me 5 gold, I killed a kobold, then he's not a hero. A hero sticks around. He solves everyone's problems. He helps everyone out. And getting to Exalted is just kind of like, in my little headcanon, a way for your character to actually be a hero.
It is a funny way that the game deals with it in terms of the way in which you're, if you're thinking role-playing or even if you're just thinking narrative, the way in which your character interacts with the NPCs in regards to these reputations. Because, Mad Season raised a great point in a relatively recent video of his regarding the Argent Dawn, where he says, it's so odd that we have to grind and get reputation up with this faction just in order to win the right to go and save the world for free.
Yeah, like I said earlier, the Hydraxian Waterlords are the sworn enemies of Ragnaros, and they give you just the littlest pittance of reputation for killing the guy. It's like they don't even really care.
Oh, yeah, that. Thanks for that.
Yeah, he'll come back in a week. Don't worry about it. But hey, I mean, it's nice.
All right. Well, look, thanks so much for giving us a little bit. I just wanted to have obviously a bit of a brief gloss over of reputations and remind everyone that they are a thing. They're coming back in Classic. They can be a bit of fun. So be sure to do your research on your rewards and take the time to invest in what you think is worth it. But now that we've covered that a little bit, just one thing before you go. So let's talk Minoru for 1 second. We won't get too nasty. We won't get too personal, but you're his brother. You've grown up with him. You've played the game with him around. Have there been any big fights over it? Any big disagreements? Any, issues in game with each other?
Me and him actually shared an account, and we handled that in a bit of an interesting way. Just don't tell the mods about it, I guess. I personally used my money to buy the GameCube when it came out. And what we'd wind up doing is we'd trade percentages ownership of the GameCube in exchange for days of WoW time. It's like, oh no, I really want to raid this Thursday, but that's his day because we alternated. It'd be like, I'll give you 5% of the GameCube if you let me play that day.
Ah.
And when time came for college, I had 51% ownership. I took the GameCube. It's sitting right behind me still.
Very good. All right, Valda. Well, look, thanks so much for calling in. I really do appreciate it, and we hope to hear from you again in the future.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you kindly.
Okay, we've got another caller on the line now, and who are we speaking with today?
This is Matt. I also go by Bazel or Dark Phenomenon over Discord.
Thanks so much for calling in, Matt. Now, if the listeners aren't aware, the listeners in Discord may well know about this one, but we were hoping to get you in on a group call with Neil and Viv and Palfuris just last week about BlizzCon, but unfortunately you couldn't make it in the end after all. But I'm glad that we've got you here today because much like Neil, yourself, you're a developer for a mysterious AAA studio, and you've obviously got some insights from within the industry as to what you might be expecting at BlizzCon, and I presume as well, obviously, you're probably a big World of Warcraft classic fan if you're involved in the Discords and all that jazz, and you might have some thoughts of your own. So I guess I'll start with this one. I'm not sure if you may have heard that chat that I had with Neil, Palfuris, and Viv, but did you have any expectations from Blizzard in regards to the kind of information that we might be getting at BlizzCon?
Well, I kind of echo, I did listen to it. I kind of echo Neil's response when he's kind of surprised how far along they are and they'll actually have a demo we can try.
So when you hear things like a demo being ready as a developer yourself, you obviously would have some idea of what goes into these things. When you say you were surprised, and Blizzard themselves have said it's a bit unprecedented to give people a takeaway demo like this, would that be something that would be particularly difficult on their ends to run, or do you have any commentary on that?
Depending on the time in the development cycle, it depends. I know the big thing with Classic was getting the infrastructure up and running, and if they have a demo, that sounds like they have that up and running.
So with the demo being announced, did that adjust the line at all for you in regards to release dates?
Yeah, I think it could potentially be out earlier. It's hard to say because the big thing with developing games is developing the systems and the features, and then all the assets that go into a game. So assets, there's usually a lot more of them, but you can kind of dogpile people on it depending on how many people you want to bring on. So like if you're creating art assets, you can bring more artists, right? So you can speed that up. Systems and features, on the other hand, generally take a set amount of time. It's kind of more cooks in the kitchen, doesn't really cook a chicken any faster. So originally I was thinking around the end of the year, 2019. With them having the demo, depending how much content they still have to do, because I know they mentioned updating databases. So if they only have, like, say, 2 characters in the game and 2 zones, there's a ton of other database updating they'd have to do. Like, you got professions, dungeons, raids, like all the other content. I don't know how long it's going to take and how many people they have. So, but if the systems are up, I'd say that's probably the majority of their work they have to do. I could see anywhere to summer all the way to the end of the year, whereas originally I was saying end of the year, like November at the earliest. Now I could see it maybe summerish.
Okay, now we do talk about sort of the size of the task at hand, and it's been something that people love to comment on, including myself, who have absolutely no fucking idea what they're talking about because we're not involved in the industry at all. And people say, you know, we're going back now almost a year in time for people speculating like, Classic couldn't be that much work. They've got the code. They can just whip it up in a second. And obviously here we are a year later, and that's not quite the fact. But in terms of the difficulty that was before in front of Blizzard in taking on this project and how much might be left to go, as a developer yourself, do you sort of think, God damn, like I'm surprised they took their project on. That would have been a shitload of work. Or are you on the opposite side saying, this shouldn't have fucking taken this long? What are they dragging their feet on?
I'm definitely not surprised how long it took. I know generally from project to project, they will update the engine they're on, and that's just like a year difference. So when I heard they were taking a 13-year-old game, I thought they were taking the old engine and having to update 14 years worth of tech and hardware updates. And I was like, I don't even know how the hell they're going to do it. It sounds like a crazy task. But they seem to think they have a way to use the new, it sounds like they're using the new client and just modifying it to pull old vanilla data, which seems like a lot less work, and it seems like they've got most of that done. So it's really hard to say what exactly they're doing and how much kind of infrastructure and tech update they're doing or not. I can see it going a lot of different ways, and as a developer not knowing what they're doing, it's really hard for me to kind of know what they're doing, what challenges they have left, and how much work they have left to do.
Now, just focusing on the demo a little bit, what are you going to be buying the virtual ticket and getting involved in the demo at all?
Yeah, I bought the virtual ticket before they even announced a classic demo.
Okay, so now knowing that you'll have access to the demo when that was announced, coming from the angle that you'll be coming at it from, are you sort of thinking or wondering at all how they're going to do it? Or is it going to be the case? So, I mean, because obviously there's speculation out there like, oh, okay, they've pretty much, insinuated that we're going to get 2 zones apparently, 2, iconic zones. Everyone's saying it's probably going to be Elwynn Forest and Durotar is the best guess. And it is still just very much so a guess, but would you be surprised to see that it's literally just those zones walled off, no access anywhere else? Or do you think that maybe people have said that maybe they'll just depopulate the rest of the world and we might have free reign, but only those 2 zones would be populated and have anything in them? I mean, it's so hard to say. What are you expecting?
I expect the zones to be blocked off. I don't expect us to be able to venture outside of the zones they've allowed us to check out in the demo.
And so what are your plans for the demo once you get access? Do you know there's a certain class you want to try out? Do you want to see how combat works? Do you want to sort of see if there's obviously been any changes or anything like that? What are you most excited to find out first with the demo?
I think the most thing I'm excited to find out is if they have stuff like dynamic spawning or any kind of changes to help the start or the launch of the game to kind of spread it out.
Oh, it's a great dry run for them, isn't it?
That's huge, yeah.
It's because it's the head start that I guess they probably needed, because that's been one of the bigger questions with all these, if people do happen to play private servers and people who have been involved in the launch of private servers. Obviously those numbers are vastly inflated from anything that was Blizz-like on a server of Blizzard's, around that 2,500 to 3,500 population cap that people say. Sometimes you get 10, 15,000 people trying to log into a private server at launch and things of that nature. But it will be interesting to see how it's all handled, and when we're all just dropped in on day one, which is going to come with Classic, there's going to be a day one, we're all going to be there. How are they going to handle it? Did you expect dynamic respawns?
I'm kind of on the fence. I would like to see some kind of dynamic respawn or sharding or phasing just in the starting zones until people spread out. But I don't know if I expect it. I know a lot of people will be kind of upset if sharding is anywhere in Classic. I know a lot of people are very outspoken about that. So I want to see one thing, but I'm kind of on the fence if I actually expect it.
Well, interesting note on sharding. You are right that it seems like the vast majority of people are quite anti any kind of sharding being in the game. And if people aren't aware of what sharding is, it's when they basically, I'm going to you'll be able to explain this far better than I will, but effectively displacing people who are on the same server into different I wouldn't describe it as an instanced area, but you're essentially taken somewhere else, even though you're in the same area, where it makes it a bit easier for your, the server to, process. But now that was probably the worst explanation of sharding of all time. But anyway, with you being pro sharding just in the starting areas, are you absolutely sort of hopeful that they'll do it when Classic drops and that's it, just those 1 to 10 zones?
Yeah, just the starting zones. I also wouldn't mind if they only have it in for a couple of weeks until kind of the initial rush is passed and then remove it. I kind of wouldn't mind that as well, actually.
It's always interesting to hear people argue for all points. Like, it might be an unpopular opinion, but it's certainly something that might make a lot of, have a lot of common sense behind it from Blizzard's point of view. So it will be interesting to see what we get. But, if I can sort of turn just quickly to your work as a developer, and it's interesting because I've now had a few big devs come on the show. It's not just Neil. There's been a couple of people come on now, and many of them work for studios that we can't name. And I can assure the listeners that everyone who's come on who's identified as a dev works for a very big name in the industry. But the way in which you view World of Warcraft, do you find that working in the industry makes you far more critical than the average fan? Are you able to lose yourself in a game and just enjoy it as a fan? Or do you just sort of sit there and analyze it and go, oh, they fucked up this scripting and I know what happened here? And do you know what I mean? Do you take it to the nth degree with how you view a game?
No, I kind of shut off my work brain when I play games. I'm in very different mindsets when I'm at work and when I'm kind of casually playing a game for fun. It's funny because I'm similar to Neil. I'm not actually a fan of the games my company makes. So right. They're different styles of games.
So what do you gravitate towards in terms of, like, are there certain genres that you just stick to? Like, do you just stick to MMOs or you play a bit of everything?
I'm a little well-rounded. I actually get motion sickness, so I can't play any shooters, so stuff like Half-Life or any kind of the popular shooter games I can't play. I actually will vomit if I play them for any length of time.
Really? So that must stop you, obviously, from, I'm presuming, can you still work on them? In
limited aspects, yes. It's funny, when I first started working 16 years ago, the very first title I was on was kind of a shooter title.
Yep. So. Oh, how funny. That must have been a fun one to explain to the office.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's actually, in the game I had, there was all shooter. They had one sub-level, so it was more driving. So I'm like, I can do that one. Give me that level.
Excellent. All right. Well, look, last question before we go. Out of interest, what class are you most emotionally invested in that you'll probably be starting up first for the demo?
I'll probably start with the Priest back in vanilla and all the way up until Cataclysm. I actually 2-boxed a Priest and a Warrior, so I'll be doing that when Classic actually launches. But for the demo, I'll be starting out with a Priest.
Okay, well, you just, again, sorry, I always do this to people. I promise them I'll let them go, and then you say something that makes me want to ask another question. You talked about 2-boxing, and multi-boxing is something that we haven't really talked about on the show before. Is that something you like to spend a lot of time doing?
I do. I started in vanilla because, as you're probably aware, leveling a warrior alone, there's a lot of downtime and it can get pretty slow. Mm-hmm. So adding a priest to it, it was so much better, so much more convenient, so much quicker, almost no downtime. I couldn't go back to playing a warrior without a heal bot after that.
Now, for anyone who might be looking into getting into multi-boxing, do you find it sort of a difficult thing to get into at the start, or it's relatively self-explanatory?
I don't do a lot of complicated multi-botting. I've only done 2. I haven't done like a full party of 5 or run dungeons. So I actually just have 2 PCs, 2 mice, 2 keyboards, and I set like a row of macros with my priest to basically follow, to assist, and basically cast a bunch of spells that my warrior's targeting. So it's pretty simple the way I'm doing it, and it's actually pretty easy to get into.
I can already assure you that it's well beyond me as the filthy casual fan that I am. But look, thanks so much for calling in. I know it's late where you are. I won't take up too much of your time. And we hope to speak to you again in the future, and maybe we'll get Neil in on the call next time, and we'll get a bit of a dev breakdown of maybe Classic when it drops.
That sounds great.
And that's the show for the day, everyone. Countdown will be back next week, coming to you from sunny California, as we'll sneak in 1 or 2 more episodes pre-BlizzCon. So we'll just see how it all goes. I'd love to record some live chats with fans while I'm out and about in LA and Anaheim. And I've got some recording equipment with me. Now, it won't sound 100% the same quality as usual, so please do bear with me while I'm away, but it's pretty damn close to it. So I'm sure you'll all still be happy, hopefully, with what I can push out while I'm on safari in California. So wish me luck as I jump on this brutal 14-hour flight with my dungeon companion and sleeping tablets in hand to keep me company. But just before I let you go, I just want to shout out to some very dedicated patrons of Countdown to Classics. So shout out to Flozy B, Palfurus, Permadrunk, Rarebit, Romani, Tsunami, The Anton, Wilson Ma, and Velarco. Thank you so much for your phenomenal support of the show. Countdown to Classic would not be the same without your support. And also a big thank you to supporters Bossman764, Hurlbert, Good Kisser, Myrtlebanks, Purgatos81, Tim B, and Zudamos, as always. That's it from me for the day, everyone. So signing off from Down Under as I'm about to get on a plane to the old US of A. Have a great weekend, everyone.